welcome to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. I hope that you're doing well and are enjoying the podcast and the topics we've covered so far. These podcasts are released every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening to be kept up to date. So today we'll be covering how to use food to help manage your hunger a bit better when you're trying to lose weight or dieting. And this is an important topic because often it's something that people often find as a stumbling block or don't know how to approach, and they feel that they just need to hold on and ride it out as long as they can, when often there's things that we can do to their diet and around that will help make the process a bit easier. Dieting isn't easy, but there are things that we can do to make it a bit easier. Before we jump in, I think it's important to cover actually lightly what hunger actually is. And it's a very complex physiological state with lots of different factors that it depends on, but it is a normal thing. We are meant to have hunger. We are meant to have periods where we're feeling full and more hungry, and it's a sign from our body that actually we're due to have food. And often when we're dieting, because we're taking in less energy than our body needs, our body is very aware of that, and that's not a good thing for our survival in the long term, because when we're hunter-gatherers, if we weren't able to find food, our body would tell us you're getting hungry. There's also signals from our fat cells as well that will tell us that we're running low on body fat levels, which when people get really lean, gets really difficult, and body starts to really drive up those signals that we need food. So our bodies are very clever and actually want to keep us with good amounts of body fat, wants to keep us healthy, wants to keep us full. And if we're not meeting those requirements and we're trying to drop body weight, it's almost like a modern problem that we've created. It's actually telling us that you need to find food, and that's one of the things that you'll probably notice when you're dieting, is you become extremely food focused. And hopefully with these adjustments around your diet, we'll be able to help manage that hunger, that food focus, that difficulty controlling our habits and behaviors around food a bit better. So here's 4 ways that I found really useful, and I use a lot of my clients to help manage hunger. First of all, protein. Protein is a fantastic bit of a part of our food, I should say. And it's one of the most important macronutrients when it comes to dieting. The research really supports in regards to helping people manage their hunger a lot better. It's the most satiating. And when I am working with someone with assessing their calories, often we'll get the calorie goal, and we'll go to protein first. So out of those calories, what amount of protein are we going to use up first before we even go to fats and carbohydrates? And that's because it helps maintain muscle mass, helps with recovery, but helps with managing satiety as well. And that maintaining muscle mass as we age is really important as well. And when I talk about protein being really satiating, that's different from really filling. And I thought it was important just to do a quick cover on what's the difference between being satiated and being full. So being satiated is a lack of desire to continue eating, when fullness is like a physical feeling within your stomach. It's slower to occur when fullness will sort of happen and you'll feel it almost immediately, when sort of satiety requires hormones and signals to get to the brain. And satiety depends on the types of food we're eating, when actually fullness depends on the volume, the actual amount of food within our stomach. And that's an important thing to differentiate that using protein. And one of the other things that we'll talk about later is around fiber and filling foods. Those two combined can help us manage our hunger a lot better. One of the things that I thought was really important is when we talk around ketogenic diets and we talk around higher protein diets, this is where they really come into their own. And this is no way me endorsing ketogenic diets. Just one of the things I noticed is that when I've done very high fat, low carbohydrate diets in the past, satiety was a big part of that. And that's probably where it really dominates, like high protein diets, is that you don't really have a desire to eat much more, and can actually not be taking a huge amount of energy and a huge amount of food, but you really lose interest in a lot of food. It's not really appealing if you're turning up to something that's got no carbohydrates in it. There's no sauces, there's no creaminess within those foods, or enjoyments to match up with the creaminess if you are having sort of very high creamy foods in. And protein is quite bland, but it's also very satiating. So you tend to lose interest in, and that's probably one of the benefits, very few benefits with ketogenic diets, and one of the benefits of high protein diets in the long run. So it's really important that if you're trying to manage your hunger, trying to get a good amount of protein in there, the regions that I would usually set is aiming, well, it depends on where the person is at. When they sit down with me. If they're not eating very much protein at all, we'll probably try and include it in 1 to 2 meals if we can, build from there. But usually we're looking to try and get 3 to 5 servings of protein throughout the day, aim between 25 to 40 grams of actual protein within those meals. And that can take a lot longer for some people. Some people pick it very easily, and we're trying to build that habit long term. As if you listen to previous episodes around breakfast is one of the areas that's usually an easy win to try and get some protein, because people don't tend to have it, and having that protein at breakfast can really impact the rest of our food decisions throughout the day. So having a good bit of protein, if you're having whey and some oats, if you're having omelette, if you're having some sort of lean meats in there potentially for breakfast, it potentially will help you manage your hunger between then and lunch a lot better, when people who might have any breakfast or might have like very low protein breakfast might find in an hour or two they're feeling hungry again, they're snacking, and that's a sort of the ripple effects of having high protein in your diet. So first of all, high protein. Second of all, as I've just touched on, is high fiber foods and high volume foods, and by that I mean sort of fruits and vegetables. The reason I refer to that is because usually they're quite big for the amount of calories that we get, that actually would call them quite voluminous. And this is where the stretch within our stomach sort of happens, and we're trying to take advantage of that, including lots of low calorie foods, sort of your fruits and veggies in your meals. One of the key ones that I've done before is when you're making a spag bowl, putting some like grated courgette in there to really bulk up the volume. Gets that stretch receptors in your stomach working a lot better and playing them on side. It's not going to solve all your issues, and a lot of these things just going to blunt the force or blunt the hit of hunger a little bit. That hunger probably will be there still, but these things will sort of dull it down a little bit. One bit of research that I found was people who were dieting increased their fruits and veg by 3 servings per day, actually lost more weight, but actually reported feeling less hungry, which kind of makes sense, that they're getting more volume in their diet for less calories. If you take 1,000 calories of fruits and vegetables, it's a phenomenal amount of food. It's going to be something that you probably struggle to get through throughout the day. Probably get quite bored of it as well, not having much diversity in there. But 1,000 calories of something that's highly processed, that's high in fats, carbohydrates, that is got a bit of salt in there as well, and like a chocolate bar or something like some chips with, I don't know, some sauce or some fish and chips, for example, could easily bust it. Pizza is a good example. Can easily get 1,500, 2,000 calories within that. But when we put it down into fruits and vegetables, it's a lot more food. So again, using that to your advantage alongside protein, having lots of volume within your food, lots of fruits and veggies, along with all the other benefits as well around health, diversity of food, fiber content within our gut, the vitamins and minerals. Yes, those are all fantastic things, but often the way that I can get people on side when they're dieting to improve actually the quality of their diet is actually will help with your hunger a lot more. And again, find interesting ways of getting fruits and vegetables into the diet for people, and that is a sort of habit we try and keep long term for health benefits long term as well. Third on the list was hydration and low calorie drinks. One of the things that I tend to advise clients not to do is drink their calories so much, because they don't tend to satisfy us that much, and often there's some no calorie or 0 calorie options that are a pretty easy swap. So having something like a 0 calorie diet or a Diet Coke or Coke Zero instead of a full sugar Coke can give you a lot more calories there, potentially having a look at 200 calories that can be used elsewhere within a meal, potentially for maybe the fruits and vegetables can go in there, or a good source of protein, and it's just making us manage our calories a lot better. People who drink before meals tend to manage their hunger a lot better, I tend to find. And also, when we're talking about hydration with water, it's linked to mood, it's linked to people potentially feeling a bit sluggish, their energy levels, and if those aren't in a good place, then it's not a good recipe for sustainable weight management or increasing their energy output or making better decisions. People who are happier and have less highs and lows in their mood, and if we can do that through hydration, that's a massive win. Or if that plays a part, that's a massive win. Tend to make better decisions around food, and therefore when we're making better decisions, then it's going to be more sustainable long term. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. One little thing around low calorie drinks is that there's a big trend within the fitness industry, on social media in particular, that they'll give you these amazing recipes, and it's amazing what the food industry is able to do now when we have these really tasty and low calorie and really good diet versions of food, but they can be really high in artificial sweeteners, and sweeteners aren't bad. There's not something that I'd say stay away from. The only thing I would say is that it can upset your tummy a little bit, and sometimes, and I know personally, it's not necessarily a sweetener. It might be an amount that I hit throughout the day. So if I'm having lots of diet drinks, if I'm having some protein bars in there and things like that, that can be a recipe for disaster for me personally. So being mindful of the amount of sweetener, if you are using that as a tool in the toolbox, to be careful of the amount and the frequency, and potentially might be different types of sweetener as well for certain people that are more sensitive to them. Last of all, and this is something that often is brushed over by people, is having a bit of balance in your diet is really important. And I know you might think, well, that makes sense, Louis. But the reason I say this is often people who diet on one extreme or the other, if we're talking about low fat or low carbohydrate, which tend to be the way that people go, rather than managing their calories, they might go Slim World, a slimming group, for example, where they go very low fat. They might find that they've got really high cravings at certain points, especially if stress and other things, tiredness come into play, that can heighten those cravings. And they might go, well, I'm just going to go for some of my low carbohydrate snack bars. I'm going to go for a really voluminous, or some my oats with some courgette in there and some sweetener. And that'll do the trick because it will stretch my stomach. And yes, it will. But often people are chasing something that isn't within those foods. And the things when you list, if you're craving, it could be if you're on a very low carbohydrate diet, it's things that are very high in fat. And a way to sort of avoid this is having a bit more balance in your food. And when we talk about setting macronutrients, or the protein, fats and carbs within someone's calorie range, what they make up, the protein, fats and carbs make up the calories. Protein is really important, and fat also plays a role. There are health impacts that if you go too low for too long, and often with clients I'd sort of recommend not going below 20%, especially for long periods of times. But that 20% could be used to benefit you as well. So if we're having a low fat meal, for example, say our dinner is going to be a low fat meal, having a follow-up dessert that's going to be a high fat dessert that's going to be low in carbohydrates can be a real good pairing. Pairing up these foods helps with the satisfaction from our meals as well. So what we want to do is try and balance out our meals, that we're not going to one extreme or the other, because often we'll start craving what we're skimping on. So it can be a really good way to help manage your hunger and manage your diet, manage the sustainability of your diet long term, just by having a little bit more balance with regards to carbohydrates, proteins and fats in there. And that's something that I really recommend looking into and seeing if there's anywhere in your diet where potentially we can still be calorie conscious, but have been a bit more smart or smarter with our food choices to help with sustainability long term. So that's my 4 tips around managing your hunger when you're dieting, in 4 different ways with food that we can help manage our hunger a little bit better. Protein, really important, highly satiating. Having it at most your meals or every meal, maybe in some of your snacks as well, will help with managing that satiety and potentially you making better food decisions later on. Fiber and volume, trying to get those stretch receptors in our stomach working a little bit better. And also the diversity within our food, the fiber within our gut is really beneficial, and also the micronutrients. So there's lots of other benefits, but with dieting, having those voluminous foods for lower calories is a real big win. Number 3, water, hydration, and lower calorie drinks, using those to your benefits, scratching that itch, helping manage our hunger. And there's loads of good research around low calorie drinks helping or having positive benefits to people's BMI, managing their hunger, their weight, preventing or managing sort of lifestyle conditions like type 2 diabetes. So don't be afraid of them, but be aware of the amount of sweeteners potentially you have within your diet if you're really leaning into them. And last of all, having that balance in your diet. Yes, we talk about different types of diets, preference of foods and things. I do feel like there needs to be a feature of protein, fats and diets and carbs within your diet, and you figuring out how that's going to work for you, different food choices that you would prefer, seeing how we can get them in there, potentially doing some simple swaps in there to help manage your calories a little bit better, fantastic. But try not to skimp on carbohydrates, proteins or fat too hard, and having them feature throughout the day can be a really useful way to do that. So there you have it. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. If you have any questions, queries, or would like to reach out to me, please do. I am at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUISPADIAN Nutrition on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and all other social media platforms. If you're looking for support in achieving your goals and living a healthier, happier, and more balanced life in the process, click the link below and inquire about working with me. Remember to subscribe to the Balanced Approach podcast wherever you're listening for more insightful episodes, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.